Okay, so again, this is the Importing Data webinar, and I'm going to go ahead and log in as an administrator. Okay, and then just to verify, I do indeed have a blank database. We'll go look and make sure we have no students. So I don't have a thing. I have no staff. I have no activities, so I've just got a completely blank database. Okay, so I'm going to start building this from my imports. Okay, now before we start importing the data, there's a couple of things that I want to set up in advance that's going to make my life easier. The first one I want to do is have a current semester. Okay, so I'm expanding Center Setup, and then I'm going to click on Semesters. Okay, and now I have a Fall 2012 in there. That's an old one, but I want to use one that includes today. And remember, AccuTrack, when it opens, it looks for what today is, and then it will load any of my activities that are on my selected side. Now, I don't have any activities to put on my selected side because I haven't imported them yet, but I know when I import and I have a current semester, it will automatically put them all on my selected side. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make this Spring 2013 and change my dates here. And we'll say January 9th, 2013 through, how about the end of March? And we'll make it the end of May. All right, so, and that's 2013. Okay, so the first thing I did is create a current semester, and it'll say I don't have any activity assignments, but that's fine. I'll say yes. And I need to change that name, I guess. Okay. All right, so now I have a Spring 2013 out there. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do, I know in advance that in my student import file, I have two profile fields that I want to import into. And the profile fields, as you remember, are the fields right here for each student record. So I've got the canned profile fields here, favorite color, ethnic background, whatever, but I can make those anything I want. Okay, in my import file, which I'll show you shortly, I have two fields. I have major and I have graduation date. Okay, so I want to import those into profile field 1 and 2. Okay, so to make my life easier for the import, I can go change those labels right here before I even start importing. So here's my first one, which is favorite color. Well, I don't want that. I'm going to make it major and save that. And then I don't need male and female, so I'll delete both of those. Okay, and then my second profile field is graduation date. So I'll make that grad date and then remove all of the ones that were already in there. Okay, so now those two profile fields are going to be there for me. Now when I do the import, it's going to show me that title, so I'll know that it's graduation date and it's major. Now, I could have left this as favorite color, not to confuse you, but I could have left this as favorite color, then imported my majors into that, and then changed the label to major after the fact. So if you don't remember to do it, it's okay. You can do it after. Just change your label. Okay? All right, so let's go take a look here. I've got various import files, and I want to look at my students with registration. Now, let's see. I think I changed that to text. Hopefully I can just make that a CSV. Okay, and then let's open that in Excel. Here. Okay, so I want us to take a look at the import file here for a second. And what I've got here is a registration import file. So this has all of the information about my activities. This classes, this short list of students that I'm using are registered for this semester. So this one file has a lot in it. It's got all my student information. It has all my activity information. And then I've even got some stuff about instructors. So all of this information is going to be imported multiple different times. Okay, I'm going to use this one file to import for my students, my category and activities, my instructors, my registration, and my local lab import. So that's all going to be handled through this one import file. Okay? Okay, so let's go back and I'll do the student import first. Okay, so back to AccuTrack here, and I'm going to expand database and do import. Okay, so the first one is my students. Now, by the way, you'll notice here, and I don't know why we haven't changed this yet, but I'm looking at files and I don't see my CSV file. So I have to click all files in order to find that. I don't know why that is, but it just is. So that's my student with reg. So I'm going to open that, and I want to put that into my student information. Okay. Now there's a couple of options here I don't need to worry about with a blank database, but it may come into play. It says update student data from import file if student already exists. So that means if the information is different on the import file than it is in AccuTrack, it will update the student record from the import file. Okay, the second one is inactivate students that are not on import file. So let's say that students have graduated or moved on. You can keep them in the database to report on them, but if you set them to inactive, they can't sign into AccuTrack. Okay, but I'll leave those blank. Okay, and then I get a preview of my import file. Now this should look just like we're seeing it with the lines separating each of the values. If for some reason it doesn't show that, well, you can try using a different delimiter here, a tab or a comma, to see if you can get that view. If not, then you would need to go back and check your import file to make sure everything is happy there. Okay, but you want the view to look like this. Okay, I'll go next. Now I'll clear my mapping so we can start again. But the only three pieces of information I have to have are the yellow ones, the user ID first and last. But I've got a whole lot more. So I'm just going to click my column here and hold the left mouse button. It'll turn into a finger, and then I drag that where I want it to be. So here's my user ID, my first name, my last name, email, address, and then I'll scroll to the right to move through my file. Okay, I've got city, I've got state, and a little lower I've got my zip code, phone, oops, and by the way I put that in the wrong one, so I can just highlight that and press delete to get rid of it. Okay, but I'll drag that to phone. Here's my cell phone. Okay, what else do I have? There's my major and my graduation date. So if I scroll down a little further here, I'll see now I have major and grad date. So it reflects the profile labels that I changed before I started. But what I'll do here is click on major and then drag it in. And the reason I do that, and some of you may have seen this, is if I'm up here and then I scroll down to that and try to drag in grad date, see, it's going to jump back up. So that's kind of an odd little thing too. But I'll click on the value first, then drag it in, and it won't jump on me. Okay. Now I've got a lot of other stuff in here about my activities and instructors, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay. Now the other thing that you'll notice here is, let's go back over to student ID. Okay, I've got, for instance, Charles Conrad in here twice. I've got Bonnie Amico in here twice. So if I did this import, well, it would give me a uniqueness violation, right? But I don't care about that because I only want to get one student in here. So it'll take one of the Charles that I pick and import it. Okay, it will just tell me about it being the same record, but it will import one of them, which is all I care about in this case. Okay, so I'll go next. Now, I have different, and I should have shown you that in my import file, but for my major field, I have values in my import file. Well, one of them is English, one of them is nursing, one of them is physics, one of them is undecided. My heading label of my import file is major, so I don't want to import major into my major. Okay, so I'll click all of those and add them. Okay, so it's going to add those to the profile list, and it's going to add them to the student record. Okay, so my next one is graduation date, so I'll take 2013, 14, 15, 16 and add those. Okay, and then what we're seeing here is just like I told you, I've got these magenta, which is telling me there's uniqueness violated. Now, Susan Watson here is green because there's only one of her. Charles Conrad has uniqueness problems because there's 3 of his. And remember, the reason is because it's a registration import. It's got the 3 classes Charles was registered for. Okay, now I could just do finish and it would import one of those, but you can see it's trying to import my header row. So I don't really need to do that. I could do select all and finish and it would be smart enough to do what I want. But if I do select all records, well, I can just pick each particular record that I want. So it's totally up to you. You don't have to do this. Obviously, if you have a million of them, this would be more than you would want to do. But either way. Okay, I click finish, and now it says 6 of them imported successfully, 6 of them not selected. Now, if I didn't do that step from before, it would say imported 6, 6 had a uniqueness violation. So either way is going to get the job done. Okay, so I'll do all right here, and now let's go look in our student record and see what we've got. Okay, so now I've got Bonnie, Tammy, Roger, Charles, Lauren, and Susan. Now also we can notice I have major and grad date, and here's English 2015, undecided 2016, English 2014, etc., etc. Okay, so I know that was a good import. Okay, so that's really pretty much it for the students. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to import is my activities. Okay, and any of you who have been using AccuTrack for quite some time, it used to be that you had to create a category before you did the import, but it's smart enough now to be able to add that category. I think if you don't even have a category field and you try to import, it's going to just label the category registered classes. Now, I wasn't aware of that, but Nick, our other support rep, told me that that would work. So you don't necessarily have to have a category there, although I would recommend it. If you don't have one and you do the activity import, it'll just create a registered classes category for you. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and use that same file, and now I'm going to import my activities. Okay, so let's go pick that again. And the activities table. And I know my file looks good. Okay, let's clear this and start again. So what I have here are all of the fields I have to, or don't have to necessarily. Now this one's a little mislabeled because it says yellow here on activity only. Well, I guess technically that's true because I mentioned that the category will be self-generated. But I would say, you know, go ahead if you have it, put your category. This is your activity ID, maybe a CRN number, or if you have, you know, I don't know, ECO 1102, and then be, you know, ecology, whatever would be the activity name. Activity other is just another field if you need a third identifier for the activity. Lab ID, now this one has been superseded with another import I'm going to show you, which is a local lab activity import. So you don't even have to trouble yourself with Lab ID anymore in this. I have instructor first, last, and email. Okay, so let's go ahead and import that. Now I do have a category here. It's called course list. My identifier is here, ENG 1102, etc. Here's my actual activity name. I don't have activity other. I don't have to worry about Lab ID. Okay, and then here's my instructor first, instructor last, and instructor email. Now I want to show you one thing on the import file before we do that. Okay, and that is, let's look at our instructors and our courses for a second. Okay, here's a good one, this first example. Let's see. Okay, I want you to look at this first record, this ENG 1102 English Comp. Now that's exactly the same as this ENG 1102 English Comp at the bottom, right? So those are exactly the same activity name, but what's different here is I have 2 different instructors. Okay, so 2 different professors teach my ENG 1102, Henry and Helen. So what it's going to do is have just the one activity, but it's going to import 2 instructors for that activity. Okay, so we'll see how that works. Okay, so back to AccuTrack, I can move on. And it's got some courses that are exactly the same? Well, we knew that already, right? Because we have ENG 1102 3 times here. 2 for Henry McBride, so that is indeed a duplicate. But then another one that has Helen Caldwell as my instructor. So my expectation is I have one ENG 1102, Henry McBride is one instructor, and Helen Caldwell is the other. Okay, so I have 2 that violate uniqueness. Well, I had 3 of them, so 1 of them made it, and I have 10 that got in there. Okay, so now let's go look at those activities. Now, what I've done here is I didn't say selected rows. This is funny because it imported my header row, didn't it? Well, that's fine. I can just get rid of my header row. So now I have the one I want, my course list, and there's all the courses that I had. Now let's go through these. See, I have Amy Clark teaches anatomy and physiology, Carrie, there's Henry for British Lit, Molly, and one of these I know should have 2. Here we go. So we have, ENG 1102, English Comp. I have Helen and I have Henry. So it imported both instructors for that course. Okay? Now you can change your, if you want to modify that, you could change who your default instructor is. Default instructor just means which one is going to be highlighted by default when the student signs in. Now you don't have to have any default one at all if you don't want to. Okay, so that's all that's for. Okay, now I said that I was going to do an instructor import, but my instructors are already in my activity, and AccuTrack is already smart enough to put my instructors in the instructor table here. So if I click on instructors, see I've populated my instructor list just from doing that activity import and putting my instructor first, last, and email. So there's no need to now do an instructor import. It's already done for me. Okay? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is the next step is I'm going to do a registration import. Now, what is that for? A registration import is very important if you have, 300 courses that you're offering. Well, you sure don't want the student to have to sign in and pick and choose, find that needle in a haystack to see the one course that they're trying to sign in for. So if you do a registration import, the student is only going to see the 4 or 5, however many classes they're registered for this semester. Okay? All right, and here's my registration. Here's where I can view who's registered. Well, here's my courses, and this says selected over here. Those are the students registered, and as you can tell, I have nobody registered right now. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that import now. Same file again. Okay, and student registration. Now here I have overwrite current registration. Well, that would be important again if I had a database for a while. Let's say the students were registered for a certain number of courses in fall, and now they're registered for spring courses. Well, I don't want them to see the fall courses, so I could get rid of fall and just load spring. That's what that means. Okay, but I'll do next. Same file, so it's fine. And we'll clear our mappings again. Okay, now what we have here, ID category activity user ID. Now this is sort of confusing with ID and user ID. Okay, but identification, that is the activity ID. Okay, if you're using it. You don't necessarily have to. But here is my activity ID here. I called it course ID, but that's what it is. Okay, now the category is here, my course list. The activity is the description of the activity, English Comp here. And then my user ID. So all the way over to the left, my students. Okay, the user ID is the student ID. I import that and do next. Okay, and it looks happy, but I think this first one's going to fail, right, because of the ID's not right. And sure enough, class unknown and user unknown. Well, that's because the user is stu ID and the class is course ID course. So it knew not to import that. Okay, which is my header. Now I could have just not selected the header if I wanted to. Okay, but let's go back and see that registration again now. And Tammy's registered for anatomy and physiology, Charles, Roger, Tammy. Okay, now I have English Comp. I have 3 students registered for that class, so that they were all in that import file, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now, in order to enable registration, in other words, to just show the registered courses, I would go to my Setup Options here, and I have one little checkbox that says right here, only show registered activities in the activities screen. So if I use that registration import, then I'd want to check that box. Okay? All right, we'll do that. Okay, now the next one I'm going to do, and this is a new feature in AccuTrack 12, is import the activities into my local lab. Okay, now local labs, for those of you that don't know, I think I covered that in another webinar, but I can set up one database to provide different information depending on which sign-in station I'm using. And a good example is I have a math lab and a reading lab. I want the reading lab to show my reading stuff. I want my math lab to show my math stuff. Okay, so you accomplish that with local labs. Okay, and I'm going to go to my expanded view here, set up system access, excuse me, try that again. How about center setup, and then I have lab IDs. Okay, so lab IDs right here, and I can define these as I go. So I have a math and a reading. Well, I could put science, I could put library, whatever. You can have as many local labs as you want. Now, before I do a local lab import, I want to have these labs set up because that's what I'm going to use for the import. And what you're going to use in that import file is the lab ID. Okay, so math, reading, and this is case sensitive. So if I have all caps math, all caps reading, that's what I want on my import file. Okay, now let's go do that local lab import. Now, if I wanted to, and I actually did this on my import file, but you can go add that local lab ID for the activities that you want to put in there. You know, so you can change that or edit that import file to put the local labs you want. Okay. And yeah, I'll go show you the file first. And way over here to the right somewhere, I think. Let's see where it is. Here it is, the last one, lab ID. So you can see I have reading and math. Okay, now I have some that don't have reading and math. So this means my reading ones will go in my reading lab, my math ones will go in my math lab. Well, the ones that don't have it, they're going to be in the default lab. Remember, the default lab is the all lab. So my all lab is going to show everything math, everything reading, and everything that has no local lab designation whatsoever. Okay? And then I'm sure you probably know, but what I'll do on the sign-in station that's sitting in the reading lab, well, I'll go set its local lab ID. I'll tell it that it is the reading lab sign-in computer, and then it shows all its reading stuff. Okay, so that's how it knows. Okay, so back to the import, and I said local lab, which is, let's see, activity lab registration is the name of this import. It's at the very bottom here. Okay, I'll click Next. Okay, so in this one I have lab ID category, this is activity ID and activity description. Okay, so way over to the right I have the local lab ID. Now my category is course list, my ID is course ID, and then my activity description. Okay, I'll do Next. Now, it's showing some different things here. Well, I have two that are exactly the same, right? Well, I don't care about that. I have ENG 1102 twice, both in the reading lab. Well, I only need to get one of those, and I will. Now, if I wanted to do it a different way, I could do selected records and just pick one of those. Okay, so it's up to you. Or just do all records. I'll just do all records and move on and we'll see what happens. Okay, so class unknown, that's my header row, right? Imported successfully 6, which is the 6 classes that I put into that. Now I have lab unknown 1. I think that probably has to do with my header row as well. Okay, now I had more than 6 records on my import file, but remember a few of those didn't have a lab ID set at all. Here's a good one, I think, is it molecular biology. So it just ignores those. They just stay in the default lab. Okay. But now let's go look at those activities and we can see what happened there. Student set up activities. Okay, so my first one here, I don't have any local lab at all. If I had one lab or many labs, they would show up here. Okay. Now if I wanted to import that into, say, Math Lab 1 and Math Lab 2, I could do the import, the local lab import for Math Lab 1, and then have change that local lab ID to Math 2, excuse me, and then do that same import again. Then I'd have them in Math Lab 1 and 2 here. So they can be in multiple different labs. Okay. All right, so let's continue down. Molecular biology is default. Okay, now I have British literature, and that's in my reading lab. I have Fun with Chaucer in my reading lab. Endocrinology is just in my default. There's another reading, and now I have college algebra in my math lab, robotic design in my math lab, thermodynamics in my math lab. Okay? And again, if I wanted something in math and reading, I could just import twice. Now, let's say I want robotic design to be available in my math and reading lab after the fact. Well, I can go in here and modify and now add it to my reading lab. So now I've got robotic design is in my default lab, which all of them are. It's also available in my math lab and my reading lab. Okay? So that's the local lab activity import. Okay, and I've pretty much exhausted what I can do with this one file. But as you can see, I got a lot of value out of this one file. I did a whole lot of imports with that. The students, category and activities, instructors, registration, and my local lab import from this one file. Okay, so that's when you call and you tell me that you're going to do imports. What do you need? And I always say get everything you can, because we can pick and choose what we want, and it's always good to have as much data as we can get. Okay. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is import my staff, my tutors. Okay. And just to verify, I have nothing there. Okay, this is a pretty straightforward one, very much like the student import, but I'll do import, and I'll pick my file. I have a tutors import here, which is right here, and I'll put that. Now this is called staff. We kind of changed terminology here, but your tutors are your staff table. Okay, so I'll go next, and the file looks good. Let me clear this. Okay, now what I've got here, well, I've got Misty Malone in here a couple of times. And why is that? Well, let's see. She's got ENG 1102. Yeah, I'm not really sure. It looks like I've got duplicates on that, but I don't really care. It's not going to hurt anything. So my user ID, in this case, is my tutor ID. There's my first name. There's my last. Address. City. State, zip, okay, email, phone, cell phone, and then I have some other stuff here for courses that I'll show you later. I'm going to use that for something else. Okay, so that's all I really need. Now a card ID, I could import that if I wanted to. That's a secondary ID that you can have for the tutor, so they could sign in with either their user ID or card ID. Okay, but I'll do next. Now, as you can see, well, I've got some duplicates and some other things going on. I think I could import that and it would be happy, but just to be safe, I'll just pick the ones I want. Okay, so I'll just pick those selected records. And now I have 5 of them that made it and 6 not selected. So it says 6 because I have a header row. So I had duplicates there, but I got the 5 I wanted in there. I'm done, and now let's go look at our staff, which is tutor setup tutor, and there they are. There's all my tutors, all 5 of them with all the information I had. Okay, so the tutor import's done now. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is it's going to be tutor activity assignments. Now some of this may be overkill for you. You may not even need to do it. But what I mean by that is if I went into the tutor and I did add remove assignments, as you've probably seen, I can go pick and choose what courses Bob is available to help students with. I can do that by moving them from the top to the bottom. But I now have the ability to do that with an import. Okay? So I'm going to do an activity assignment import for my staff, for my tutors. Okay, and that's also in my tutors file that I just used right here. And that one is another new one at the bottom called Tutor Activity Assignment. Okay. Okay, now in this one I need the ID, which is the activity ID, the category, the activity description, and the tutor ID. Okay, so I'll go a little different here. That's my tutor ID. Let's scroll over to the right. There's my category. A little more here. Here's my ID, my activity ID, and my activity name. Okay, I'll go next. And tutor ID, I don't think it'll import that anyway, but if I wanted to, I could just, and by the way, if I hold the Shift key, I can select a whole row of those. Okay, so 10 of them made it, 1 of them not selected. And let's go take a look now and see what those tutor activity assignments are. Okay, so now Bob is teaching English Comp. Kim has Anatomy and Physiology and Endocrinology. Misty, various English courses, and for molecular biology, advanced thermodynamics, etc., etc. Okay, so I did that without having to go in and do my add remove assignments. So that may be handy for some of you. If you only have a select number of tutors, you don't have a whole lot of different activities, well, you can certainly build them manually. Okay, but the option's there if you want to import them. Okay, now the other thing I want to mention is we don't have an import for this, so you have to do it on your own. But remember, in order to schedule appointments, I need a couple of things for the tutors, right? I need the tutor activities, and I also need the tutor schedules. So I still have to go in after the fact and create the schedule for when the tutor's available for appointments or sign-ins, okay? And I can do that the normal way in my tutoring, my schedule window here, or if I decide I want to schedule my tutors on a week-by-week basis or bi-weekly or whatever, I can set their schedules week by week using Advanced Scheduler. Okay, but I still have a little manual work to do to build the tutor schedules. Okay. Let's see. All right, so we've done our students, we've done our tutors. Now what I'm going to do is import into a student group. Okay, now student groups are very important, and I'm sure a lot of you use those, but especially for reports. So I can go run a report and see who's signed in, but signed in for what group, whatever groups I've designated in AccuTrack. So using local lab designations, I mean, I've got a lot of filtering available to me. I could run, for example, an activity report that would show me all of the students who have signed into my math lab who are in my at-risk group. Okay, so that's what those are used for. Okay, now a student group import is a very simple process. I only need one piece of information to do that. So I'll show you a little trick here. Okay, and I've got a student group import, which is somewhere in here. Oh, right here, if I could see. All right, studentgroup.csv. And I'm going to pick student groups right here. Okay, now I don't have my line there, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. Okay, when I click delimit it, because there's only one column there, right? So it got a little confused, but I went ahead and make it delimited to get my line. And you can see all I've got is a student ID, and that's all I need to build a group. Okay, so right here, I've got user ID. Now, as you can see, I have group name, but I don't have group name in my import file. Well, a little trick there is I can just type that in. Okay, oops, got cap lock on, sorry. Okay, so now I have an at-risk group that these students are going to be put into. Now, another little quirky thing is, see how my gray button, or my next button is grayed out? I just need to click back on column 1 and it lights that back up. So go ahead and type in the name you want, click back to column 1 and it'll light it up and you can move on. So I'll click next, and there's my at-risk students. So now I can go back and let's look at my student groups. So now I have a group here, student setup groups, and there's my at-risk. and there's the students that are in it. So Lauren is not in it. AccuTrack guest is a system generator. Don't worry about that one. But these are the 5 students that are in my at-risk group. So you can have multiple different groups. And again, back in reporting, I have a filter for that. So if I do visits by activity, well, I can do them for my at-risk students that have signed into my math lab. Okay? So that's how you can use those filters for reporting. Okay? All right, now the next one I'm going to talk about is media types. Some of you may or may not use those. Those are just materials, loan materials that you'll give out to students, you know, books or DVDs, any kind of calculators or whatever you may loan to students. Okay? Now that's in my media stock, which let's close some of these. And right here, media stock. Okay, now there's a little setup I'm going to do in advance here for my media stock, and all I want to do is add the media types. Okay, for instance, I have books and I have DVDs in the example I'm going to show you. Now, I don't necessarily have to predefine my types, but I like to do that because otherwise when I do the import, it'll say type unknown. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that first, and the way I do that is a little strange, but I'm going to click Edit. Then I'm going to click my little buttons right here, okay? Now I add the media type. Okay, now I want that to be exactly like my import file, so let's go look at my import for my media. Okay, and you see I have book and I have DVD. So that's what I want these to be. So the first one is book. Okay, and now I can set rules about the default checkout period for my media type. So in other words, for all of the books that I give out to people, I want them to have it for a default period of 2 weeks. Okay? Now that means after 2 weeks it'll be late and they'll start getting those hate messages about you have late media. Okay? But I'll add book and then I'll add DVD, and I'm going to say my default period for my DVD is 4 days. Okay, so now my media types are waiting out there. They're defined. I can revert to go back. That's all I wanted to do was add those types. Okay, and now I'll go do the import of that media. So I'll pick my media CSV file, and it's right here, media stock. Okay. All right, so there's my import file. It looks good. All right, and then I've got a few different fields here, my media ID, and this could be a barcode for you. So in other words, you put a barcode on the book, you put the barcode number, and then you just can scan the barcode to check the book out. So that's up to you. Here's my media type that I just defined. Here's my media title. I could add an instructor if I wanted one. I don't have one, and I can put notes in there. Okay, so I'll go next, finish. And I've got my DVDs and books in there. And now I can go look at my media stock and see what I've got. So here's my books, here's my DVDs, and you can see my media types are predefined, so everything worked fine there. Okay, that one has a note on it. Okay, so it's just that simple, and then you're ready to start checking out. So you go, a student wants to borrow a DVD, well, you can see what's available, what's out, and then check it out to the student. Okay. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so I defined my media types and then I imported my media stock. All right, now the next thing I'm going to show you, now I know I'm moving awfully fast, I'm just roaring through these imports because I have a lot of them, but I'm going to put this on YouTube, and if you guys want to go back and review it, say, what did he do with that media again? It'll be out there. And, I can send you the link for what that YouTube is. You can just go out to YouTube and type in imports webinar. I'll get it right eventually. And you'll find the YouTube out there. Okay? All right, but the next thing I want to show you is student pictures. I want to import pictures for my students. Okay, now the first thing I want to show you, and this is kind of important, is how you share pictures for all of the different sign-in stations and for people that are using AccuTrack. Okay, You do that through the shared application path. Okay, and what I mean by this is a shared drive that you're going to have somewhere out on the server, okay, and you're going to put your pictures out there in the pictures folder on that share. Okay, let me go back to show you here. Okay, so let's say I have a Z drive out there. Well, I would want all of my various people that are accessing AccuTrack or AccuSQL for that matter to be pointing to that Z drive. Okay, now in that Z drive I have a pictures folder. Okay, and this is where I'm going to drop all of my pictures, and then those pictures will be available from any sign-in station, anybody that's pointing to that database. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay, now I can import all of my pictures from that shared pictures file, and it's a done deal. Everything's taken care of. Okay, so let's do that import. Okay, and that is, let's see, desktop. And it's student photos. Now I have a certain number of photos that are already in here, but I've got those out on a shared drive already, okay? And I created a share on my support 1 computer, and I have the path to that in my import file, okay? And this will make sense when I go do the student photo import. Okay, so here's the student photos, and let's see, delimited. That looks good. Okay, and you can see I've got 2 fields. I've got the user ID and the picture path file. Okay, so this is a UNC path, it's called, but this actually says, well, go out to my support 1 computer. I've got a folder called Dave Share. Under that, I've got something called AccuPhotos, and then here's all my JPEG files. Now, you may ask yourself, well, wait a minute, why is this different than that thing I just showed you with the pictures folder? Okay, what AccuTrack is going to do, it's smart enough to know to go out to this shared computer, go find all the pictures, import them, and then it's going to move them, or I should say copy them, all to that shared pictures path. So you can load them from anywhere. You can load them from your C drive, your D drive, it doesn't matter. As long as you have that shared folder in your database location, then it knows to drop all of these pictures in that pictures folder. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay, all right, so I'll do next. So this is, just to clarify, this is the source of my pictures, and then my shared pictures folder in my application path is where ultimately the repository is for the photos. Okay, not the source, but the destination, if you will. Okay, so I'll finish that. So I've got all my pictures in, and I can go look at my student records and see if they have pictures on them. Well, sure enough, there's Bonnie, there's Tammy, there's Roger, Charles, Lauren, etc. Okay? So just that simple, and if they're in my shared path, then anybody using AccuTrack is going to see the photos. Now, the photos are nice for if you want to see who's in. You can see a picture for that. You can use a photo to verify that who's signing in to AccuTrack is really who they say they are. So there are various uses for that. You can do tutor photos too. So the student can look at a picture of the tutor to see who it is that he's supposed to go find to get help with, right? Okay? All right, now the next one I'm going to show you, and like I say, this is the first time trying this, but this is a grades import, okay? Now grades import is used for program assessment, and program assessment is used to see how effective your center is. So what I can do is go run a report to see for all of the students that have signed in my center, have their grades improved, because of the services or using our tutoring services. Okay, so it's just a way to evaluate the entry and exit grades of a student that's signed into AccuTrack. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go to my database import again, and I'm going to pick my grades right here. And I have a grades table. Okay, so I'm going to import those grades in. All right, and I'll go next. So as you can see, it's the same sort of thing, right? I've got my activity category, I've got my user ID, so all the usual stuff, but the two things I have now are grade first, grade final. Okay, so I'll go ahead and map all this stuff. Okay, and then I have letter grades here. So I'm going to do, now I could do two imports. What I mean by that is I could do a grades first import and 6 weeks later do a grades last import. So it would then import the last grade. But I've got both. Let's say it's the end of the term. Well, I can put their starting grade and ending grade in here. Okay, so I'll go next, finish that. Okay, so now I've got all my grades imported in. And let's go take a look. Let's see, and I don't think I have anything in there yet, well, because nobody's ever signed into my center. But that's okay. You know, I'm just showing you. Actually, I'm sorry, I can probably, yeah, there we go. We got it. I just had it students without grades. So here's, oh, British literature. Do I have anybody in there? And like I say, it's my first time trying this. But I have a feeling it's probably because nobody's even done anything yet, right? Not sure, but it looks like it's actually showing stuff. So if I go to, I don't know, let's try my English comp and show grades. Okay, so it actually did do the import. I guess it's just not sure because nobody signed into it yet. But it looks like Charles went from a B to a B with no change. Lauren went from a C to an A. She went up. And Susan went from B to A. She went up. Okay, so I know my import works. Okay, and we're almost done. The next thing, and actually the last thing I'm going to show you here, is scheduling an automated import. Okay. Now, what that means is, registration is a good example. So let's say during drop add period, I know that I'm going to get a file from Banner every night that has the drop add information in it. I want to update my student registration in AccuTrack, you know, to reflect the students that have added a course or dropped a course. Okay, now I could do a scheduled import for that. And the way that scheduled import works, well, let me just do one, and then it'll make sense to you. So I'm going to import my registration again, even though it's already there, just because I want to get to the schedule as automated import. Okay, and what I say, registration, which is in my big file. Okay, now I could overwrite current registration. Well, that might not be a bad thing during drop add, right? Because if they were registered for a course and dropped it, you could overwrite it and that would go away. Okay, so I'd probably select that. And then my mapping is all going to be the same. It remembered that from before, but I can verify that. 14 course ID, 13 category, so everything looks good there. Column 1 user ID. So that's just like it was. Okay, I do next. Now at the very end of that, I've got a button right here, okay, and the button is scheduled as automated import. So it remembers everything I just did. It remembers the source folder where I got the file from. It remembers the file name. It remembers all my mapping. It remembers whether I want to overwrite current registration or not. So everything I just did is sort of recorded. Okay, now I can schedule that as an automated import, and then I can determine what days I want that to run, what months I want that to run, what days of the week I want it to run, and what time. Okay, so let's say, I don't know, Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. I want to schedule that as an automated import. Okay, so I just pick those days. Now I said every day of the month, every month of the year at 7 o'clock Monday through Friday, I want you to go find my registration import file and automatically import it into AccuTrack. Okay, and I can do that for multiple different imports. I could do that for all of my imports if I wanted to. Okay, now I can go see the schedule for any of my imports by clicking on Options, and then it's under General. Okay, and I have a button it's called Scheduled Tasks right here. So when I click on that, well, sure enough, here it is. Periodic imports, student registration, the source computer, which happens to be the laptop I'm on, and then I can look at the schedule. So this is what I just set. Okay. If I had a student import, if I had an activity import, a tutor import, I could have all of those in my periodic import list here. Okay? I think that's pretty much all I've got. I'd recommend, go out to YouTube, and if you want to cover a particular topic, media imports or whatever, to go out and watch that. And I thank you all for your attention. Okay, bye.